Happy Saturday. Let's talk about inspiration for content. I'm going to try to make this a little bit shorter than they've been running because it's Saturday and I don't have too much time. Typically, inspiration for content is one of those things that keeps coming up in dang near every single conversation I've had this week, from the writing mastermind to a bunch of traffic on Twitter, conversations and here and there's, and personal questions and such. When you're looking for inspiration for your content, be it books or lead magnets or emails or whatever, typically for me, the inspiration for content comes from necessity, like 80% of the time. And then there's the stuff that I want to do, the stuff that has caught my eye for some reason. An example of the necessary content, email chains. I do not particularly find forming email chains enjoyable. I do not find crafting email sequences to be enjoyable. You can get some great content from people who really put their minds to it, and I follow a few of those folks, and they put out some banging content every week. Another example of necessary content might be building out your website, building out products, because you want to offer your book, you want to offer your service online, you have to build your product, you have to build your WooCommerce store, you have to build your whatever. No, I'm not an affiliate, so don't worry about that. You have to build that content as necessity, especially early on. When you're putting things together, that foundation, that mile-wide foundation that Alex Hormozi talks about, that's super important that you build that. And by necessity, you're going to wind up 90% of your time is committed to stuff that's necessary, not necessarily inspirational. Not necessarily something that you really want to do. For me, after I've finished my necessary content and I've cleared that stuff out of my head, I've cleared the decks, I've done what I need to do to get that stuff out of my head, either completing the task or writing it down on a list, that's when I can begin fiddling around with the fun stuff. That's when I can begin fiddling around with the stuff that's inspirational and enjoyable. The necessary content production is necessary. The stuff that's inspiring is that new story that you want to write. It's that inspirational thing that's going to step up your game and move you to the next level. That's what Alex Hormozi is talking about when he's describing creator time versus manager time in his videos. When you're in your creative time, you are building something that's necessary for your business. It's not necessarily that fun thing that you've always wanted to do, but it's definitely got to be that creative production stuff that you need to get done. That's the essential. That's what you're putting together. That's where you're going to make your 90%. The more time you can commit to first finishing your necessary content and then moving on to and developing your inspirational content, that's where you're going to start finding your true. If you can take that inspirational content and you can find an audience for that new science fiction book, that new high fantasy book, that new punk book, that new dystopian post-apocalyptic survivalist book, whatever you're putting together, that may be your ticket. By the same fashion, some of the ladies I was speaking to in this writer's mastermind, they were writing stuff that's informative. In the group, we had two women who have sewing businesses. They create like little squishy, they're like little knit balls of like cute little characters and stuff. And I don't play in that field. I don't really know how it works, but they like sit there and move the sticks and twist the yarn and stuff and make cute little animals like Santa Claus. You express that to your audience. The problem that's being presented is, how do I make this Santa Claus hat? How do I make this Santa Claus feet? How do I connect the feet to the body? Because there's different stitches and movements of the hand that are required for each of those. One of the women is basically describing a necessary process to get her sewing patterns, her knitting patterns put together, which is cool. She's already got a lot of the content. It's just a matter of putting it together and assembling it. She's so good at that stuff that she can knit a character while she's having a conversation. It's like second nature. Her brain doesn't even have to engage. She's so good at it, which is impressive to say the least. For her, putting together that book is a challenge because the book is something that she has not practiced. It's on a subject that is necessary for her business, for the math purposes. If you produce a YouTube video in stitching or knitting or whatever, you might be getting 2 cents per 1,000 views on your video because it's not a very high paying niche. You're not in finance, you're not in insurance, you're not in banking or whatever, where there's a lot of money involved. So when you're taking that process of knitting, if you have all those thousands of people who are watching your channel, say you get 50,000 people watch your video, 50,000 people times 2 cents per is 50 times 2 cents. You've made like $1. Not so great. If you turn around and you say, hey, by the way, everybody, not for nothing, but at the bottom, I made a stitching book that teaches you how to put the feet together on these things. We've had a lot of questions on it. So here, check out that book, the first comment in the description. Now all of a sudden you've got a call to action to a book. And if you're selling that book as a PDF from your website and you're selling it for $2 and 1 out of 1,000 people buy it, now all of a sudden it's $2 or $2.50 times the 50 people. Because if 1 out of 1,000 people go and buy the book, that's 50 people out of the 50,000 people who viewed your video. Now all of a sudden it's 50 times 2 you've made on that video. And now that video that took you 30 minutes to make, you've turned around and you've made however much more money on it. That may be a necessary piece of inspiration for your genre and how that kind of connects. She's in the early process of exploring how to put her book together. She's not in execution phase yet. She's in learning phase. It'll be a little while before you see that, before I'll be able to link to her channel and her book. When you're pulling that stuff together, that's how you want to do it. For me, that's the kind of 2 pieces of content that I'm going to produce. It's either going to be necessary content or content that's inspired and creative. That's how I end up viewing stuff. Right now, I am in the phase of grinding through the necessary content, because if you have that necessary foundation in place, just going back to my favorite person in the world, Alex Hormozi, saying, hey, if you have your foundation, if you have a mile-wide foundation, you build a mile-high. Foundation amplifies everything else that you do. But if you want your creative process later to be in place, you need your website, you need your email sequence, you need all of your videos and all your other pieces and parts in place, or you're going to fall off the table. And that's exactly the mistake that I made in 2011 when I had 2 best-selling books on Amazon, and my dumb head didn't follow up on them with the necessary foundation work. And so, don't be me. Have a great weekend, and I hope that you are inspired to create something cool this weekend. Have a great